Hello, can you hear me? Like say the background globally for the BP, they move a lot for the green energy. Um, then we move back to the background for Vietnam. We see currently, last month, a list of 91 projects. It's nearly like 6,976 megawatts. Yeah, wind project added to the power development planning number 7 of Vietnam. And we see the news number 2, we see the local TP Bank and Bamboo Capital. They have agreement like 11,000 billion Vietnam dong. It's nearly around 474 million US dollar. And the news 3, we can see the Denmark, the IP, and the local Asia Petro of Asia, the agreement to develop the offshore wind. Then we go back to the organizer. Organizer is a BUiM Group, Ho Chi Minh City Office, and the European Offshore Wind, Beijing Office. We jointly organizing Vietnam Onshore and Offshore Wind webinar. The other event, we can say the 3rd Vietnam Onshore and Offshore Wind Summit, October 20 to 21 in Ho Chi Minh, and the Japan Offshore Wind Summit 2020 in October 1 to 2. Then also we can see the Korea Offshore Wind Summit, October 7 to 8 in Sheldon, Seoul, Korea. Then now let's move to our first panel, our panel moderator, Dr. Minh Ha-young, Executive Chairman for Vietnam Initiative for Energy Transition Social Enterprise. And we can see his short CV. And we can see they have many publications here. So now I hand over to Dr. Minh Ha-young.
I'd like to thank everyone for being there. We are over 215 to this webinar on onshore and offshore wind power in Vietnam as a warm-up to a 3rd conference in Ho Chi Minh City to happen later this year. Myself, I am a binational French Vietnamese. I'm joining from Paris, where I am stranded for a few more months. And I am a research director at the Vietnam Institute for Energy Transition. So the housekeeping rules are, please mute your microphone when you are not speaking. Please open your video channels. Welcome to use the chat box and questions there. And we'll have 2 panel discussions after each session. So 1 session, 1 panel, 1 session, 1 panel. And the slides will be sent later after the webinar. And please do not record this conference. So may I share my screen now? Yes. If you see my screen, Brian. Okay. So the first session we'll have I'll give a few introductory remarks, and the first speaker, 3 speakers from Super Energy Corporation, from HD Bank in Vietnam, and from Société Générale on wind power, offshore wind power, and financing. As introductory remarks, to set the context, as we have seen in the first half of the year, offshore wind financing has taken the first role. It up 320% from last year, and 17 out of the 28 projects that have been financed in China, because there is a rush to take advantage of a feed-in tariff in China before it expires at the end of next year. But in Vietnam, there has been also a rush to take advantage of the feed-in tariff. It has translated in many onshore projects, but not yet offshore. We are not sure if the feed-in tariff will be extended. The proposal is under consideration at the Prime Minister table. And to set the scene, I'd like to show you 3 slides about what is the thinking on wind power in the Power Development Plan draft. So, according to Institute of Energy, there's lots of technical potential for onshore, especially in the south and central south, not much in the north. And there is about 500 megawatts that are actually authorized. That was in February. And 30 gigawatts that are not yet added to a power development plan. And also, according to the same source, we now look at the offshore wind potential. This time we have potential not only in the south center, but also in the north. Well, they don't see, but there is also some potential here. And I think the potential in the north is important after 2025, because we want to have a balanced electric network. And traditionally, the power flow has been from the north to the south, but in the next 10 years, the situation may be reversed. So overall, how much wind power do we expect to see in the next 5 and 10 years in Vietnam? Well, according to the baseline draft power development plan, this is the blue number here. So we would have almost 10 gigawatts of wind power within the next 5 years, and almost 20 within the next 10 years, which is indeed a large market. So half of it could be offshore. And it's not going to be without pains and especially hard to finance. So now let me introduce the first speaker, Dr. Supa Vaisayarat. He's a PhD and MBA in private and public management, and he's an engineer and working now for Super Energy Corporation. It's a Thai company that has lots of partnership in Vietnam, and actually it's a leading company in wind and solar in Vietnam. Dr. Supa, the floor is yours.
Just mentioned, my name is Supa. Okay, I'm working in Super Energy Vietnam. My meaning in Sanskrit or Hindu language, no, Indian language is the same meaning. Supa or super or seal is the same meaning. Okay, Super Energy Vietnam we start 3 years ago, but Super in Thailand we already start for more than 20 years. Okay, start with the first business in Thailand. We we were working on the concrete material, and after that we changed all business to renewable energy. In the stock market, there's the overvalue of the capitalization around 770 million US dollar. That is latest and checked from the 2 years ago in the stock market. Okay, we will update it later. Our business is mainly in 4 elements like water, fire, solar, and water. We make the water, cleaning water or filtering. And for the wind, we also make a wind turbine in a wind farm in Vietnam. And we are still working for the waste energy, also in Thailand, but not yet in Vietnam. Okay. Further slides. Why Vietnam? Because of the 3 criteria with the 100% foreign owned. Number second, that's what the tax incentive. And number 3 is economic growth. If you even compare in COVID time, Vietnam still in the top 10 of the fast growth country in the world. Okay, I will show you a little bit background about super energy in Vietnam. We started 2 years ago with the research in the company in Vietnam. And later on, we signed the first project for the wind, offshore wind, as everyone know, in Bạc Liêu, okay, and in Cà Mau and in Sóc Trăng. In total of the wind project, we will show you later. And after that, we start with the solar project with the 5 projects. And after that, we acquire the new project. In total, it's 6 projects or 6 plants in operation in total of the megawatt of 286.72 megawatt. And along of this time, we also acquired a new solar project in Loc Ninh that's planned to COD within this year, 550 megawatt. Of course, now we are talking with wind project. We are on the construction process. Okay. For the next year, we plan to COD for the whole wind project that in the pipeline for the 3 or 4 projects, offshore and onshore. This is already mentioned to you. That's along of Vietnam. We have 6 in operation plants, and the new plant will be COD this year. We still have another line of business for the solar rooftop. That's already signed contract or signed MOU, sorry, for the 10 megawatt with the our partner in Vietnam. And for the wind under developed, it's about 421 megawatt. So in total of this year and next year, we try to finish in total about 1.5 gigawatts. And Dr. Min Yong, sorry, Mr. Ha Yong, sorry if I pronounce your name wrongly. We also have many partners of the Vietnam partner in this country. So we also have to say that we are very familiar how to work in Vietnam. We have more than 100 staff in Vietnam right now, and these are all about over 6 plants that's already in operation. And this is the over new construction phase of the Loc Ninh project in the pipeline. Okay, this is another over line of business start already this month, and we finish end of this year also for the 4 or 5 plants that's under development. Okay, we will come to the wind projects. Now we also on the preparation phase of construction in Sóc Trăng with 30 megawatt. Bạc Liêu also will start in further. Now our vessel already in the sea of Vietnam, so we ready to start of the offshore wind project. And for the onshore, we have 2 projects in Gia Lai, around 50 megawatt under construction. We will sign contract this week and we will start project within 2 months. So it's a challenging and it's very exciting time for us to do a lot of work and develop of many of the projects in Vietnam. Okay, so this is only to warm up. So for all of you, and also what we are doing during COVID time. In COVID-19 that affects everyone. However, we are lucky that we are on the business that not much impact from the COVID. So what we can do is we can support the people in the hard time. That's how they can live and how can we do together with them. We have many provinces that in our project like in Sóc Trăng, in Bạc Liêu, Binh Thuan, Ninh Thuan, Phúc Yên, or so on. What we can do for them is in hard time, we provide food. Okay, we sharing what we have, what we can do. Like we are like Asian people, we are the family of the Vietnamese or even from other country. So what we can do for them, we provide what we have to them, food, or somehow we provide foods is in instant noodle or rice or something else. That's what we can provide to them. And for the education in hard time of the parents cannot have more or earn income during of the COVID or blockade of of the transportation. We are overstaffed that in the province or in the area to keep the money or the share for scholarship. That's what I mentioned in Phúc Yên, in Ninh Thuan, in Binh Thuan, in An Giang. That's what we have the project. We still not stop. We also doing more and more because even in this time we still that Vietnamese people also need some support from who have. I would not say we are rich company. We will say that we are living with Vietnamese. We living with the community because in my or in our experience, if we work, we only think about over benefit, over income. That's not good for the over stakeholder. We also have to consider our stakeholder as a partner. That's another thing of the scenario. Also, we working hard. We are working hard also in this time. We try to contribute. We try to participate in what we can with the people, making CSR projects or making some fun, or went to hospital, give them the some gift or maybe some of the mask. That's of some maybe cannot find in the hard time, and the table, the tool of education, we also can provide what else we can do. By the way, for the government relation, we also have to keep together with Vietnamese. That's what we mentioned in the beginning. We work here, we have to be friends with everyone. We have to work with our stakeholder, governments, private company, people, community, everything. Okay. So last but not least, I will talk about our business, how we can survive, how we adapt ourselves in the COVID time. For operation phase, that we also increase our IT, our technology or innovation, how we can work with them, like we install the IT to most of the plants to have teleconference or the CCTV to check our property. And not only that, how we check our property or we check our operation, we use drone or we use fire cam to check and to analyze in the program of image solution. That's to make the work faster. And for the hygiene of the people, not only for our staff provide the tool, the mask or the safety tool, we also provide to our staff and to the people around our area to make them safe. Okay. And another thing also, we plan to make the knowledge sharing about the COVID time. We share in like in social network, even in our staff, that to know and how to update themselves. That is not to go or to go in only in a safety place. Under construction periods, how we do it? We have a lot of work in the pipeline. If we stop only waiting for COVID, it will make us in trouble. And for about this is how we develop. So have to follow the Vietnamese government law. We can make the space of this time of working. We use increase of the machine and tool in favor to finish the work on time. And we have to import the expert from other country that we precisely checks and cooperate with the province in every project. Get approval, makes them in isolation place for 14 days, make the health to be healthy and safety for everyone here. Because even I'm working here and so far away from that area, we have to be careful about those sort of things. We don't want to have another second or third round of the COVID. And we also increase the local people working with us, because if we cannot increase the experts, even from Thailand or other country in the world, we also have to make our local engineer to work by themselves and also to to be equipped with our team and a part of the meeting in Thailand or in China as our partner, Power China, that's also our partner. Okay, most of the thing is very important that we care about the health of people. That is how we work safely, and they can come home safely every day, not just to come and face or fear of the COVID. So we also have to make this. That is to warm up your our team about the COVID situation in this time. That's what I show from the left side. That's that we increased the tool in solar project. We increased the tool or the vessel in the offshore wind. We also plan not too much about the people, but the people who working, we check every day about temperature and aware every of the safety tool. And last but not least, show you how we use the drone also to survey and to check on every square inch of the working to make everything clear. Okay, on my slide and end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Supa. So Vietnam appreciates a lot all the investment, especially when it is from ASEAN. And I'm sure that beyond all your corporate responsibility, engagement, Vietnam appreciates a lot electricity because we really need that much power. We now move to the next speaker. We welcome Mr. Tran Hoang Phuong from HD Bank. Dr. Phuong has over 25 years of extensive experience in commercial banking, and he has spoken in many conferences regarding the bank's role in renewable energies, notably solar. And so please, thank you for making your presentation full screen. And let us know about HD actions and the role of banks in renewable energy, especially wind now.
Yeah, thank you. So hello everyone. I'm banker. I'm not a technician, but we are a bank that participates quite actively in the initiative. So I try to be quick, and then what I want to share with all of us is that HD Bank is one of the banks that's active in lending to solar energies so far, and we keep doing so. Okay, so just a snapshot on our bank. So we consider ourselves one of the leading local stock banks in the market. We can see on the right side, the growth rate is quite impressive. And we have quite a strong ecosystems. We are the banks under the Sovico groups, whereby we have actually Saison, the consumer lending arms, and also we have Vietjet, the private aircraft companies in the countries, and other businesses as well. Just come right away to the content. So we are active in lending to solar energies. Here just some criteria just to share where we see and how we grant loans to companies investing in solar energy. We are supporting the clients in the sense that we can go up to 12 years on a case-by-case basis. We may provide up to 70% of the total investment. So then that would be very useful for the stakeholders might not be able to raise capital more than 30% of the total investment cost. We are flexible in terms of collateral, especially in view of the long-term loan. And then most of the times the collateral is nothing else but just the asset itself of the project. The repayment source for repaying of the loans, of course, is nothing else but just the cash generated from the company, either from the payment from EVN or the other companies, if they are on the ESCO model. And quick and short our exposures now is just in the range of 450 million, and then easily go to 500 million US dollars by the end of the year, subject to the availability of the credit quota by the State Bank of Vietnam, and also as the viable business cases from our dear friends. Just some figures. We also do the smaller scales of solar energy, which is rooftop solars. Rooftop solars, we also go to as much as possible to support our clients. 10 years here, but we have some cases we can even go longer than that. And of course, the till ticket is smaller, roughly just above 10 billion. And let's share with each other is that we have the quickly create committees with the banks, and every week we see new cases. So small businesses in Vietnam now find rooftop solar is a new mean of business model. They want to invest, they bring in the other businesses, but they want to come to solar energy wherever they are beforehand in their businesses. Well, just again, just one of the 9 examples of rooftop solars. Of course, the maximum design capacity, as you can see here, just maximum 1 megapixel. Now comes to wind power financing. Some views of us as a banker. We are ready to finance wind projects with the same similar criteria, say 70-30 ratio. From our views now, we see the price is quite good to investors and to be helpful as well, to work out the cash flow to be able to repay to the lender. Having said that, we are the bankers. Our jobs is to manage risk. We have the views that the onshore risk tend to be better than the offshore risk to be managed. Not to count the other risks other than businesses as well. So for now, we are having some prospects on the table, but one of the other constraints for us to do that is also on the high investment costs per project. So then that could be some concentration risk on the portfolio if we ever come to one wind power project. But the fact is we've been quite active in solar energy, so maybe give us some rooms to do maybe one significant wind power project to have a diversified portfolios. Last one, let's share with everyone, we are in the COVID situation. So we are mindful that every business might be impacted. We talk to some of the stakeholders and then they show us that maybe because of COVID, the sourcing is not like easy than before. The productions from the stakeholders in the world might be reduced as well. So make that life more difficult for investors that don't have already the credibility in the market. Like our friends here, my just previous speaker, super companies. I mean, maybe tougher for Vietnamese company in wind projects. Well, last but not least, just want to share with some open and free talks as a lender. What we have seen so far is that most of the cases, the most investors are quite new. I mean, even startup and small size, especially in rooftop solar, without very much track record. I mean, that's a spelling error, that track rather than trade. And especially for the EXCO model, we have to have the multi-stakeholders, companies to rent, route, and then provide energies, sell to another companies, and then for another company to be the owner of the factories and the route. So we have to deal with maybe 2 or 3 companies at the same time. That's we're facing on a quickly basis, especially EXCO model in rooftop solar financing. Third point, again, we are new, we are young. On the investment, in financing from ourselves, we just done for just 1 year young. So then for now, quite short track record in terms of operations, maintenance, warranty. and then we yet there to see the times to come, and then how things happen. Next point, we mentioned already. So for this, most of the time, or 99% of the times, well, the repayment source is nothing else but just from the project itself, collateral as well. So to be fair, that's quite numbers of risk, that's quite a level of risk of banks to be prepared to come into this segment. And then not only that, here we are not talking about 2 years, 3 years money, even not 5 years money, but it's 7 years money, 7 year, 8 years money, or 12 years money. That's a long-term payment risk. If we count on what the other told us, if you be in the business or lending for more than 6 or 7 years, quite chance that you will be hit a crisis in the cycle. So something we have to bear in mind, either investors or lender or EPC. Last one, that's for us rather than for our friends to be able to lend a long-term basis. Of course, as banks, we need to source the appropriate funding to be able to cover the whole life of the loans. So maybe I stop at here. Welcome any questions, but by and large we're open. We got wet in this segment. We want to do more, and we want to see, we want to know more and more friends and partners in this segment. Thanks everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Fung, and take good note that your bank is looking to have a diversified portfolio that includes a significant offshore project. I wonder how much the Vietnamese banks can get into significant when it comes to offshore wind, because offshore wind projects, it's billions per gigawatt. We need like 10 gigawatt in 10 years. So I'd like to pass on the questions to the next speaker, Mr. Daniel Malo, Managing Director, Head of Natural Resource and Infrastructure Asia Pacific at Société Générale. Daniel is a graduate from the Hautes Études Commerciales Business School in Paris. And I think he's very involved in financing, especially the first offshore wind farm in Vietnam. Daniel, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you very much to hear the perspective of the previous speaker. And I think from my standpoint, I can talk maybe a little bit more about the international financing market, how the international financing market looks at the industry. And I think you're right. I think the key difference for offshore versus onshore will undoubtedly be scale. The amount of capital that will need to be raised for offshore wind will be many multiples of onshore, and that might exacerbate some of the risk factors, especially around curtailment, given the large volume of electricity that will have to be accommodated by the network. So just as a quick introduction, I work for Société Générale. We are a European bank. We are focused here on the Asian markets with offices in Hong Kong, Singapore, and Sydney, Australia. We are very focused on climate change and among our commitments to the climate, we're committing to raise more than 120 billion euros of capital for renewable energies between now and 2023, 100 billion in the form of green bonds and 20 billion for renewable energy. We're also looking actively at new renewable technologies. So things like floating offshore wind or floating solar, we are very focused on being on the cutting edge. But thank you very much, Brian, for putting up the presentation. So if you could move to page 3, 2 pages down. This is a regional setup, and this is what I was talking about in terms of a commitment to the climate. So 120 billion euros in renewables, focused on new technologies. There's also things that we no longer do. We no longer participate in the coal space or in Arctic oil and sand, so very much a focus on renewables. On the next page, I thought I'd discuss very quickly, one page down, how we see the renewable energy landscape. One page up, actually. One page before that, Brian, please. Oh, sorry, now one up. There we go, the renewable energy landscape in Vietnam. So on the one hand, we see Vietnam as a country with very strong fundamentals. One of the countries that's the least affected so far by COVID-19, and one of the countries that, if we put COVID-19 aside, exhibits some of the strongest growth rates, GDP growth rates, and demand for power growth. So very conducive from a fundamental consumption standpoint. Also a geography with a very long coastline, with good offshore resource, good wind resource, so makes it probably a very strong candidate to be the first offshore wind power market in ASEAN. On the flip side, though, we have a developing regulatory framework that is still developing. And what have we noticed in terms of key items? One is the necessity to have adequate grid capacity. The industry is growing; it's growing quite fast. Curtailment has been an issue. As the projects are getting bigger, as the country is venturing into offshore, this will need to be addressed. The grid will need to be upgraded to be able to address the larger projects, the larger amount of energy that will be produced. Secondly, the risk allocation on the renewable power purchase agreement is a bit different from other markets. Areas such as curtailment, termination, dispute resolution are a little bit different than what we see elsewhere in the region, and that is a consideration for investors both on the debt and on the equity side. I think it's interesting to notice that recent investment in the sector has been driven more by local or regional investors and not so much by international investors. And that is very much unlike what we see in markets like Indonesia or Taiwan or India, where we see international investors flock to those markets. And then lastly, the projects have generally been of medium size. And I think the industry is now on the verge of moving to larger transactions. In terms of the key investment consideration, the slide that's currently on the screen, I think we see three main items as an investor. One is the regulatory framework, very important for, those are long-term assets. Those are 15, 20, 25-year assets. So the ability to have a stable, a permanent regulatory framework is important. A clear energy policy, a clear signal by the government as to which direction they want to go in. And with that also comes revenue certainty and a revenue agreement, a PPA that's of good quality. So that is one key item. The second item is risk allocation and de-risking of projects. So especially early stage risks, land acquisition, ascertaining the resource, getting your permits need to be well mitigated. I think construction risk mitigation, that will become a topic as the wind industry moves offshore and as those risks take a different dimension. And then the third item is really an efficient financing. You need to have access to debt and equity capital, terms and conditions that make the investment palatable. So on the next slide, I'm talking a little bit about why do sponsors use project finance for those kind of transactions. And those are the main reasons. The main reasons is you're able to get a higher leverage and probably a longer tenor than what you would be able to achieve on a corporate basis. Secondly, a lot of transactions involve partners with different objectives, with different credit profiles. So project finance can be a common denominator in terms of how to approach a transaction. And then it is legally non-recourse to the sponsors. So it also alleviates the corporate financing burden. So those are some of the main reasons why people go to project finance. I think we can move maybe 2 pages down and talk about maybe one more, Brian, and talk about the key risks and the key risks and mitigants that investors are looking for in financing wind farms onshore and offshore in Vietnam. And I tried to list here some of the main ones: construction risk, operating risk, resource ENS, interconnection, and then what the mitigants are. So I think on construction, I think here that the industry will be on the verge of embarking towards larger projects and offshore in particular. So we are currently advising on an offshore, advising to raise financing for an offshore wind farm. Phase 1 will be 600 megawatts, but the total project could be as much as 3,200 megawatts. So clearly the scale will be unprecedented compared to what else has been done in Vietnam. And the nature of the construction risk will also be new. So that will have to be addressed either to adequate EPC contracts, to liquidated damages for delay and performance to be provided by contractors, like cost overrun, risk mitigation factors, etc. One of the risks that's important in Vietnam is interconnection, the ability to interconnect to the grid, whether the transmission infrastructure is there to evacuate the energy. I think that, again, is a risk factor that will be exacerbated as the industry becomes bigger and as the projects become larger. I think on the market risk, I think that risk factor is becoming more accepted. The credit quality of the off-taker, EVN, they now have an external credit rating, so that makes it a bit more impartial and objective to assess. I talked about the fundamentals. The demand for energy is there in Vietnam, so those are some of the risks that are a bit more manageable. So on the next page, maybe I will talk briefly about the sources of funding. Where will the capital come from in the future for projects in onshore and offshore wind projects in Vietnam? And I tried to summarize here what the main sources of financing, of funding could consist of. And there's probably 4 or 5. One is export credit agencies. Second is multilateral institutions like the Asian Development Banks or the IFC. The third category is maybe the capital markets. We have seen one energy project in Vietnam finance itself in the capital markets. It's a thermal facility, but nevertheless, it's created a bit of a precedent. And then the fourth category is the banks, the commercial banks, and here maybe it bifurcates between local and international market participants. So all those sources of financings have different features a little bit, and they have advantages and disadvantages. So starting maybe with the export credit agencies, what we have seen in the offshore wind market in North Asia in particular is the export credit agencies playing a key role in financing those projects. So if we move for a minute to Taiwan, Taiwan has now financed 4 offshore wind farms for a total capacity exceeding 1,500 megawatts over the past really 18 months to 24 months. And in all those transactions, we have seen export credit agencies, whether it's EKF from Denmark or Credendo from Belgium or UKEF from the UK or Euler Hermes from Germany. In all those financings, we have seen the export credit agencies be a significant source of liquidity, providing anywhere from 50% to 70% of the capital required to finance those wind farms. So that, and that is in Taiwan. So I think there's reason to believe that the export credit agencies will similarly have to play an important role in Vietnam, especially as the industry scales up. One of the funding sources under the ECA program can be untied. So that can be a function of the nature of the equity participants. So they can also help mobilize that kind of financing. I think the advantages is that they can provide significant capacity. So in the example of Taiwan, Taiwan has raised approximately $9 billion today of debt financing for the offshore wind sector. And as I said, a little over that is coming from export credit agencies. So it's significant in size. They can go long-term. Those transactions in Taiwan are 16, 18, 19 years tenor, which is a good fit for long-term assets. So they have a lot of benefits. The second source of capital are potentially multilaterals, institutions like the Asian Development Bank and the IFC. We have already seen them being active in Vietnam, in the onshore wind and in the solar segment. They are a natural source of financing for emerging markets, energy transactions, and we expect them to play a role in this space. The bond market is probably a little further out in the future. It is a very good market in the sense that it can provide large amounts of capital. It is also a very good market in the sense that it likes longer maturities. So 15, 18, 20 years are preferred rather than shorter maturities. But it is a bit less flexible in terms of accommodating construction risk. So we see it potentially as a good market for refinancings once projects are operating. And then finally, we have the bank market, which is a traditional source of financing for those kind of projects. And then here again, I think it bifurcates between local and international. I think for larger projects, there will be a lot of merit to combine forces between local and international banks, given the amounts of capital that will be required. And maybe I'll finish just quickly on the next slide, which is what's the impact of COVID-19 on the sector. On the next page, Brian, please. And there, I think it's three areas in my mind. It's short-term consideration, longer-term considerations, and impact on financing sources. So short-term, I think the issue is really around equipment supply disruptions, construction disruptions. Vietnam has been fortunate up to now and has largely avoided some of those issues, but there have been recent outbreaks of COVID-19 in Vietnam. So those considerations could become more acute and could disrupt a little bit the ability to build, the ability to continue to progress some of those projects. I think the longer term considerations in my mind really revolve around demand recovery. As we walk around the region, around Asia, we are seeing demand being cut back due to lockdowns in various countries. Again, Vietnam has not suffered as much as other countries like Malaysia or Indonesia or others, where demand has been down significantly. So the question is, how quickly will demand come back? How fully will that recovery be? Would it impact procurement strategy? Would it impact the investment strategy of EVN? I'm more hopeful for Vietnam than for other parts of the region, but nevertheless, there could be a dent in demand going forward. And then the third impact is on financing sources. Clearly, we have seen financial markets being very disrupted. And we are probably beyond now the peak of the disruption. But if we look back in March, April, May, financing markets were quite disrupted. We've seen banks suffering increases in their cost of fund. We've seen liquidity dry up. So I think to me, there's two sides to that coin. The first side to the coin is that of all asset classes, renewable energy has been the least impacted. When we look at the availability of capital across the spectrum, it's been difficult for commodity-based projects. It's been difficult for oil and gas. It's been difficult for mining. In renewables, however, capital has remained readily available even through the peak of the crisis, even during the most disrupted months in the capital markets. Liquidity has remained available for renewables. So that is positive. Having said that, the cost of financing has gone up. There is no question about that. The cost of money today to borrow for a renewable energy project is higher than it was 6 months ago as a result of that disruption. It is slowly starting to normalize, but it is still higher. I don't think that is dramatic, however, I think, as I said earlier, those projects are long-term assets. They will have the ability to refinance over the course of their lifetime. So even if the cost of money is a little higher than it used to be, I think there's still a lot of value to develop projects today, to finance them today, and then to optimize the capital structure later on as the markets are normalizing. So I will leave it at that, and then we can move into the discussion. But clearly, to me, the main takeaway is that the industry in Vietnam is on the verge of taking a major stepping stone, and offshore wind will be the way to accelerate the energy transition in the country, and to bring up the amount of investments to many multiples of what we have seen to date. So thank you very much.
Now we come to the panel discussion. So since it's panel discussion time, I would invite speakers to answer directly in the question and answers box all the clarification questions that have been specific. And I would like to ask the panelists 2 questions in order to save time. One question on the grid integration curtailment, and one question on the outlook. So we know that I see there's lots of interest from the audience on curtailment and grid integration from EVN. And we also see it's one of the interesting parts from a social acceptance and social corporate responsibility barriers problem. So I'd like to ask the panelists, so curtailment, we knew it was coming when we started the solar project. And what has been your experience? Was it that painful? Do you see the light at the end of the tunnel? Maybe if Mr. Fern from the HD Bank, you have financed lots of solar projects, right? So what's your take on curtailment risk now with we start to have a few months or trimesters?
Yeah,
do you see the light?
I don't hear quite well. I'm looking for a question for me.
Yes, I'm asking about the risk of curtailment, and are you satisfied with efforts of EVN?
Ah, okay. Sorry. Let me repeat just to make sure I understand well. The questions on the repayment risk from EVN, is that right?
Yes.
Ah, okay. Yeah, just to clarify. Okay. Thanks for the questions. There's always the risk. There's always a risk. Myself or international banks like Société Générale analyzing. So then in going into this project, if not escrow, so then we are relying on EVN, who is the one to pay the projects. And the investors receive that as a source to repay the loan to the banks. I think that would be the bank's decision. That's where the bank decisions on taking the long-term risk of the one to pay. I think all the banks in the world will analyze the risk of companies. In this case, it's EVN, financial risk, and then long-term risk, and whether the bank could be okay to take on that risk, how much and how long. There will be a maximum of the risk, and then the banks will revisit the risk parameters from time to time. And in any case, the bank will have a limit on that. So the maximum risk the bank can take on EVN. To be very open and frank here, our positioning could be different than the offshore lender, where the repayments need to be converted from VND to hard currencies. Then there will be additional risks about whether there's enough US dollar to convert from local currencies, and what will be the exchange rates after 10 years. We are local banks, so we don't have to face that risk. More we lend in local currencies, and then we receive local currency payment from EVN. So again, answer is that that's a risk to be considered. That would be a limit on that, and then the limit should be reviewed from time to time.
Thank you.
That's probably the risk that is the most on our minds, to be honest, in Vietnam. And to me, it breaks down into two categories of curtailment. You know, one is curtailment for technical reasons, and one is curtailment for economic reasons or for convenience. So curtailment for technical reason, that's something you can analyze. It's very site specific. So the ability of the grid to evacuate the energy, this is maybe one part of the risk that you can get your head around and that you can analyze as it is very site specific. The curtailment for convenience or for economic reasons, that is a lot of the more difficult, right? I think whether EVN will take the electricity, is capable of taking it, but may elect not to take it. I think that is the part of the risk that's a bit more difficult to accept. And here again, if we look at other jurisdictions, the risk allocation is a bit different in Vietnam than it is in other parts of the world, you know, in terms of getting compensated for that kind of curtailment. So I think that's probably the most acute risk that needs to be addressed in Vietnam and needs to be adequately mitigated, even by having some more liquidity available or by sizing the debt by using more conservative assumptions around curtailment, in my mind.
Thank you. Dr. Supa, how was it in your super energy project?
Sorry, Mr. Supa is under urgent situation, so I am his assistant. I will answer instead of him. Yes. I am Sawalak Maliwan. Currently I'm working as the commercial manager for the Vietnam base of super crop here.
So the question is, was curtailment a problem so far in your projects in Vietnam?
Yes, of course. Actually, I would like to share our current situation that we already start operations since last year for 5 solar projects, and just get in another one this January. That is normally is need to COD since last year, but we delay from some obstruction situation regarding to the land compensation. This is our real situation. But this project is located in Ninh Thuận province that have like the extension for the COD state. Currently, on that project in Ninh Thuận, we still get curtailment and also like the off-taker payments following the requirement of the EVN. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you to the panelists. And so to conclude the panel session, I will ask my second questions about your outlook for the future. So all panelists have discussed the COVID. The demand for electricity has decreased in Vietnam. I think fossil fuel facilities will be the first impacted, but renewable energy may be completely isolated from the problem. But we still have a big price uncertainty, especially the price of gas and coal. Are they going to stay that low? And also another uncertainty in the outlook is that the government doesn't want to stay with feed-in tariff forever. They look forward to move to competitive mechanism, auctions. So auctions they are considering in solar really soon. Once the first wave of wind onshore will be completed, maybe the government will not extend the FIT, but move directly to auctions. And as for offshore wind, well, there are large projects, so the government is not ready yet to move to auctions. We are still in the pilot phase, bilateral between government and the projects. But overall, to the bankers and the project managers, are you ready for the future? What do you think your biggest problem will be in the structural change for what is coming? For maybe start with super energy. Are you ready to operate in on a bid market instead of a feed-in tariff?
This is quite like under like our consideration as well, because of as he just explained from Mr. Supa in the slide that currently we under construction for wind project, and we trying to finish on time. But however, this is have many like rumors say that if it's not extend the tariff or the feed-in tariff, so what's we gonna do? Maybe we need to do the auction. So that's why we still consider and like say push on this new. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Fung. What is the local banks take on the market outlook?
Yeah, thanks for the questions. We are positive. We are positive. One of the things is that want to say is that after the first 6 months, we've been quite successful in delivering the KPIs and the target for the banks. We are positive for the futures. We are in the COVID situations, but I think that should be over. And I think things will be back to normal again. So I think the success will come to who could be very consistent and then to be able to work in a challenging situation. We at HD Bank, to be frank now, we are not in the shock situation of prospects, but very much we are in the situation to select the good prospect to support. I think we are in COVID situations again. But business requirement, I mean, I speak not only for solar energy, for the whole business activities. We do see demands on a day-to-day basis. So we are optimistic toward the futures. More how we can grow strategically and then on optimal basis rather than worrying about the risk. The risk is there always. We have to live with risk, but then still opportunities for us to grow together. That's my view, and that's also SD Bank view.
Thank you. And to finish with the international banker perspective, Mr. Malo,
sure.
What is your outlook?
Yeah, I think there is one thing that you said in your question, is there a structural change? And I think there will very much be a structural change in the power market in Vietnam. I think you asked about thermal fuels, will the cost remain low? I think that is part of the consideration. And if we look at gas, I think gas will increasingly play a role in the energy matrix in Vietnam. That role will increase over time because we are now in an environment where LNG, liquefied natural gas, is abundant. There's a lot of it that will come out of Australia, Papua New Guinea, soon West Africa, or East Africa, I'm sorry. So it will remain plentiful, and the affordability gap has shrunk dramatically. So I think gas will increasingly play a role in the energy matrix of the country. You asked about coal. I think to me, coal is almost a different debate. Whether coal prices are staying low or will increase is almost a secondary consideration. I think it will be increasingly difficult to get capital to build those assets. Equity capital, debt capital, every year the liquidity is drying up more for this asset class. So I think that has moved from an economics, levelized cost of energy discussion to a society kind of discussion where there's just very little capital available anymore for that asset class. So I don't see a great future for coal. I think gas will play an increasing role. Feed-in tariff versus auctions. You know, as an investor, as a lender, we can work with both models. I think feed-in tariffs are helpful to get an industry started. And I think they played that role in Vietnam to get an industry jump-started. But as the industry takes root, there is a path to move to other models, to auctions. We have seen that in other markets as well. I think if I go back to Taiwan, the industry got started on the back of a feed-in tariff. But over time, that feed-in tariff is coming down as the industry is taking root and is paving the way to move towards auctions. So I think that is very much a model that we could see evolve in Vietnam as well. And then finally, the other silver lining and the other source of opportunity in Vietnam, in my mind, is around distributed generation. Increasingly, we will see an interest in corporate PPAs to source green energy directly. And I think that will also be a pocket of activity that will grow and that will provide opportunities for investors.
Thank you, Mr. Amaro. And this concludes the panel discussion and the first session, for which I thank all the three speakers. And now I introduce the second session of this webinar. It will be moderated by Mr. Stefan Robertson. Stefan is partner at the Lantau Group, well known and a leading consultancy on energy in the region. Stefan has over 25 years of experience across electricity markets in the Asia-Pacific region, working in different capacities, including market and strategic consulting, project development, merger and acquisition, and project finance. Stefan has covered a number of the Lantau Group most strategic markets, including Vietnam, Malaysia, South Korea, Taiwan, Indonesia, and China. So, Stefan.
Well, we'll do a second panel here now with four participants. We'll follow the same format. We'll have each of the panelists give a brief presentation, and then follow that with a Q&A and panel discussion. But let me first just say a couple of words about the Lantau Group. We cover the Southeast Asia, Northeast Asia regions, as well as China and Australia market, and then increasingly in the last few years, South Asia. And in Vietnam, we worked with renewable end developers, PE funds, but also with multilaterals such as ADB and World Bank, as well as the Vietnamese stakeholders, MOIT and ARAB. So we'll follow on. We'll just basically continue the discussion here on the wind power sector and the prospects for wind power in Vietnam. And as we said, I mean, there are really two things that stand out. One is that makes Vietnam unique in a regional perspective, if not sort of in many ways a global perspective. One is the sheer numbers that we spoke about, and secondly, quite frankly, is the urgency by which you know, the build out of wind power is planned or anticipated, maybe. We heard before that there've been, I think Brian, when he led off here, he said there was going to be, that recently was 7 gigawatts of wind power projects approved. We've seen the current draft, the work in progress of PDP8 envisions 10 gigawatt by 2025. And, you know, MOIT will say that there are probably around 250 projects with a total capacity of 45 gigawatt that's applied for approval or are registered with MOIT. So there's no lack of wind gigawatt. And again, the second part of this is that it's not long-term targets, not wind power that's going to be built out by 2040 or 2050 or a very long, almost abstract target for renewable energy. Or it's a lot of it is really targeted for 2025. And part of this is that while falling cost of wind power and renewables in general, and of course all the green attributes are all drivers and positive, but you know, I'd suggest that the actually principal driver now for wind power in Vietnam is the overall supply demand, where there isn't enough power now. There won't be enough power next year. There won't be enough power for the next 3 years or longer. And it's very, very difficult to quickly ramp up the build out of coal and gas-fired generation. So basically, MOIT and EVN is left with renewables as the main, you know, one of the main ways it can, in a quick and short term, increase the generation capacity in Vietnam over and above what's been the outlook. So it's the fundamental picture obviously remains very strong, and it's therefore a pleasure to discuss something that has such a positive outlook, but nevertheless, of course, will face some difficulties. And I think the speakers we have here now that will help discuss this is a combination of, we have World Bank representative, we have private sector participants that are developing and investing in renewables or being involved in renewable power or power transactions and financial advisory. And the first panelist is going to be Murthy Nooni. He's a managing director from Marshall Global Renewable Energy. Is based in Singapore, but I think the main operations or target for his operation is Vietnam. And Marshall is it's a Singapore-based platform for developing renewable energy assets in Vietnam. And here he covers both solar and wind, and in total he has around 500 megawatt in development right now. Marshall Renewables is sponsored by Marshall Funds, which is a London-based investment group specializing in private equity and public markets investment mandates, but with a focus on sustainable and responsible investing and promotion of renewable energy. So, Murthy, I think you can just lead off here.
Thanks for the introduction, Stefan. Let me go to my presentation. I'll try to open my screen, yeah?
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining this webinar on Vietnam onshore and offshore wind power. I'd like to welcome the participants joining from outside of Vietnam. Hope you're staying safe and keeping healthy, and looking forward to seeing you in Vietnam in the near future. I'm presently in Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam. I've been here since February because I could not really travel back either to Singapore or to London. I'm quite happy to be here because there's a lot of work going on here, and Vietnam is quite safe. So it's been quite good. There's a lot of activity on the wind front, so it's good to be stationed in Vietnam at this time. Marshall Global Renewable Power is a Singapore-based platform set up by Marshall Funds, as Stefan already said. And we are presently developing 2 projects in Vietnam. So I'll go straight to the projects. One is the wind power project in Binh Chai province, private equity and public market investment group, focusing on sustainability and responsible investing. We have almost 1 gigawatt of project developments in between Europe, India, and now we're developing projects in Vietnam. Go to the next slide, please. Yeah, okay, great. So these are the two projects that we are presently developing in Vietnam. We have a 125 megawatt nearshore wind project in Binh Chai province, which we are presently developing. And we also have a 167 megawatt project in An Giang province, which we plan to develop next year once the policy levels are more clear. Next slide, please. Brian, next slide. Okay. So this is the actual project location. The project is in the wind project is in Binh Chai province, Tan Phu district, about 180 kilometers from Ho Chi Minh City. The 125 megawatt with about 3,200 hectares of water surface, water depth of 3 meters to nearly 10 meters, going 7 kilometers into the water. And there are 5 other projects with other developers in the province, and there is a vibrant, active development in the province, in the particular district as well. Okay, next slide, please. The resource in the location is quite good. During the wind season, the wind speeds can go up to 11 meters per second, and the dominant wind direction being east-northeast. So we are very happy with the wind resource available in this particular location. Next slide, please. Okay, so about our project development process and risk assessment. In our projects, we are particularly careful about site assessment. We take deep interest in resource assessment and also transportability of heavy equipment into the project location. And most of the nearshore and offshore projects should not have any problem with transportation because of offshore transportation is possible. So we're not really dependent on the internal roads. The 3 main risks that I would like to point out. Previous slide, please. So the 3 main risks that I'd like to point out are the permitting risk, and the previous slide. Brian, previous slide. No, the previous one, please. Yeah, yeah, please stop. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, okay. Permitting risk, grade and bankability, which the other speakers have already dealt with in a little bit this morning, today. On the permitting, a lot of foreign investors tend to struggle a little bit, but I think we're getting there. More and more projects are getting approved. About 7 gigawatt is already approved for the PDP additional, and I understand that PDP 7 additional and PDP 8 is going to be a lot more simpler. That's what I hear about permitting. So we are getting ready to start construction of our project next year. We're completing the early development process and design engineering, and probably by second quarter we try to initiate the project construction. Of course, we are also waiting for the FIT to be finalized. The second most important risk that we all face is grid availability, particularly for offshore projects, because there's not a lot of economic activity in the Mekong Delta on the waters. So the grid is really not available. So any reasonable size 220 kV lines are at least 30 to 50 kilometers away. So the developers have to get together and put up the projects because there's sufficient capacity being developed. So there is a possibility of developers getting together and sharing the infrastructure. But again, that causes its own issues because all developers may not be ready at the same time. And some developers have more resources than others. So someone will have to take the lead and build the transmission line and the substation, and others will join. Bankability and project financing, we've heard from both the local bankers as well as the international bank perspective. about financing, but at the end of the day, it is quite clear that the PPA from EVN is not fully bankable, and there is some level of sponsor guarantee or sponsor support required for bankability that has its own costs. So that's something, an issue that hasn't really gone away, and we have to find innovative ways to find project financing. Daniel mentioned about export credit and multilateral agencies, but from what I last heard, they also require some kind of sponsor support for these financings as well. International banks still believe that the PPA is not fully bankable. The local banks may feel comfortable with EVN PPA, EVN credit, but again, local costs are expensive, which makes the project a little bit less viable. On the other technical issues, it's important that detailed studies are carried out, the detailed resource assessment is carried out so that optimal project, optimal engineering, optimal design, and equipment selection, as scoping of the project, scoping of the turbines is carried out in detail. We do hear about some of the local developers not adhering to some of these things, and then they find that it's difficult to sell their projects if they do not plan and scope their projects properly. And for offshore projects, there is also possibility of using either monopile or concrete multipile. For some projects, it's more suitable to use multipile. So some other projects, it's concrete monopile is more suitable. That's the decision that has to be carefully evaluated while getting into the engineering of the projects. And then next slide, please, Brian. Okay. Now, having gone through the risks, and I would like to look at the opportunities as well. Now, we already know the PDP-7 targets and achievements. It's coming to the end of PDP-7 now, 2016 to 20. Compared to a planned capacity addition of 10.4% per year, actual addition was 9.6% per annum. So there is shortfall in production capacity during the PDP-7, which could be a problem going forward. We understand that only about 57.9% of planned thermal capacity will actually come up during PDP-7, which means that a lot of that capacity will have to be taken up by renewable energy going forward. We also understood from MOIT that there is a requirement of 5,000 to 6,000 megawatt of new power generation capacity required for catering to the shortfall, catering to the future growth in the power generation requirement. And we already heard from the international perspective for Daniel that it's really not possible. It's difficult, more and more difficult to fund thermal projects. LNG projects are being planned, but they're all large capacity, large investment projects. So we'll have to see how much of those will come up. But surely in future there is a need, there is demand, and there is a requirement for renewable energy projects. The first solar FIT has been extremely successful for 4,693 megawatt. 92 projects have come up, but the next set of projects, one is not sure again, because the FIT2 is limited to a few projects. It will get over this year. Perhaps about 1,000 megawatt may come up, as I understand. An additional 135 projects with the 10,000 megawatt are planned, but the policy is not clear. So it's going to be some sort of bidding, but again, there is less clarity on that, whether the bidding is going to be on substation basis or on on what basis. It's still not very clear. And how the bidding is going to take place without land being acquired in upfront. these are issues to be still sorted out. And as far as wind power is concerned, there is about 350 to 400 megawatt in operation, about 900 megawatt under construction, I'm told, which will perhaps get completed by FIT1. But I believe the expectation was that at least 4,800 will come up by FIT1, and that is clearly not going to happen. Another 7,000 has been cleared in PDP7 additional and more expected in PDP8. And the target for 2025 is as much as 6,000 megawatt for wind projects, optimistic target of 11,000. So there is clearly an expectation and a need that more wind projects will come up. But again, the policy, to what extent, they really cannot slip up on the FIT2 and the policy framework being more reliable to the investors. Then the other two issues which EVN and MOIT will have to look into over the next 10 years is the transmission line infrastructure. So essentially, we need to see about the transmission line capacity to go up from almost 24,000 to double from 24,000 to 50,000 kilometers of transmission line capacity by 2030, and the substation capacity has to almost triple from about 84,000 to nearly 300,000. So there is the money going to come from for EVN and to what extent are they able to privatize transmission infrastructure? That is still a question mark. The next slide, please. The last and most important thing is the development of a smart grid. So there has been a plan. Brian, next slide, please. There has been a plan since 2012 for development of smart grids in Vietnam. In Vietnam, the policy structure has been in place. But development has been slow. But you really need this smart grid infrastructure to enable renewable power to be developed and to be distributed, because it's got to be a bidirectional movement of power, not just from north to the south. It could be from central to south, central to north, or some basically wherever power is produced, it has to be transported at any point of time to the load centers. So a lot of investment will be required by EVN for transmission infrastructure. So that is something still we have to figure out to what extent that actually comes up. But it's important that the government, MOIT, and the EVN don't slip up on these things to make sure that there is no shortage of power going forward. Okay, thank you, gentlemen.
Okay, thank you very much, Murthy. We might revert back. I think we'll just continue and do all the panelists in a stretch, and then we might revert back to Q&A as part of the panel discussion at the end. So next speaker is Hugo Virac. He has 18 years of M&A and project finance experience, and most recently he's been the managing director of the infrastructure group of Storm Harbor here in the Asia Pacific. Between 2007 and 2010, Hugo was senior manager at an infrastructure private equity fund that was sponsored by the French Caisse de Dépôt and other European financial institutions. Hugo has extensive experience as a principal developer, financial and legal advisor across Asia Pacific and Europe. At Storm Harbor, he was particularly responsible for the origination, structuring, and placement of primary greenfield projects and secondary buy-sale transaction in the infrastructure sector. So Hugo, I guess the screen is yours.
Thank you, Stefan. Hope you can hear all.
Yes, you're coming. Yes, you're coming across very loud or not loud,
Okay,
but
great.
clear.
And I'm going to share my screen now.
Yes.
And thank you. So hope you see my screen now.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you, Stephen, for the kind introduction. Just maybe, and not just, I'm director of Astris Finance now. I've moved from Storm Harbor to Astris 5 years ago. So just for any confusions, I want to raise up. Thanks for organizing this seminar, and thanks for the kind invitation extended to Astris Finance to join the panel discussions. Astris Finance has been operating in Vietnam as financial advisors for a decade and active in arranging debt financing and M&A transaction related to wind and solar projects in Vietnam since 2017. This is actually the picture of the landmark Dan Nang wind project, one of the very first foreign control project reaching commissioning over the past 5 years, for which we have arranged the debt financing. We are almost 2 years actually day to day since the first loan disbursement on this project financing. So it was timely to give a quick retrospective on project financing renewable energy project in Vietnam as this juncture and as the project comes bigger. Just a few words very briefly on Astris Finance. In Astris in 4 numbers, 20 years operation. We used to be part of one of the largest European banking group and now fully independent. 40 billion plus of investment arranged as financial advisors across all the energy and infrastructure sectors. Today, renewable energy account for 50% of our activities. We have arranged roughly 6 gigawatts of renewable energy transaction across sectors and across continents. Over the, 20 years of market expansions, as I mentioned, because we became a truly global player with a strong local footprint in Asia. In addition to our regional headquarters in Singapore, we have a full office in Ho Chi Minh City, which gives us capacity to execute deals in Vietnam and in Vietnamese. We are, as I mentioned, independent, therefore agnostic to the financing solution we arrange. Our only objective is to find the best structure that works for our clients. We have access to different sources of capital, as mentioned on this slide, including local financings. 3 main business lines. First one is arranging debt financing for greenfield infrastructure projects. You've seen here on this slide a couple of projects in Vietnam. As I mentioned, the Dan Nang wind farm project, which we have arranged back in 2017-18. It's a good example of a project market where we like to move and structure transaction where there is challenges to bring conventional, I would say, project financing. Here we have arranged this 17 years term loan with no direct recourse against the sponsors from local banks. That has been replicated a year later in the solar sector with this 50 megawatt project that you see on the slide as well. We also active in the M&A sectors, arranging involved since the beginning of the years in sell-side and buy-side advisory mandate in connection with wind and solar projects in Vietnam, both in development stage and operating stage. Last but not least, we are not afraid to take the early development risk with our clients, sharing vision as to potential of a new market, as we currently do in the offshore wind sector in Vietnam. Started to advise on the banking and financing aspects related to the development of one of the first offshore wind platform. And we are talking about in terms of gigawatts of projects. Turning to a bit of sharing views and a retrospective on project financing of the Vietnamese renewable energy market. In general, I think main message for what we've seen over the past 3 years, despite the flows of the PPAs, possible sources of financing has increased quite well since Damnan financing I mentioned. We have seen, we see development financial institutions like ADB refinancing a number of solar projects with limited sponsor support. There are now a few precedents of wind project finance on the ECA-backed structure with local bank guarantee, with some form of backstop recourse against domestic sponsor, as we understand. We see more domestic banks, definitively, as has been mentioned earlier on by Mr. Fong, entering the sector, either as lender and or guarantor, looking at more project finance structure than pure corporate finance, as local banks were more typically used to do until now. Not to forget, indeed, the development of domestic capital market. There is now a couple of examples of domestic bond. I'm not sure we can call them yet project bond, but some form of domestic bond to finance solar projects, with credit enhancement or corporate recourse, so not yet fully real project bonds. Anyway, when developers come to us with a question what the project finance solutions are available to date in this market, our response is that I think at this stage we should leave no stones unturned in a way. There is not yet plain vanilla project financing solutions. There is, as I mentioned, a variety of possible financing structure to be considered with advantage and disadvantage. That's where we typically help and support clients to comparing these options. And the main criteria comes in terms of comparison are obviously the term of the debt, pricing, tenor, financial governance, one. Second, the level of recourse against the sponsors. All our clients are very sensitive to this. Timing and predictability to deliver the financing solution on time, and possible constraint with respect to refinancing the construction loan or the construction financing, whether it's by equity or loan. Most of these financing structure that you see on the screen has two legs. One leg on the left-hand side is the lending funding component, which can either come from local financing, international DFIs, or as I said, bonds, capital markets. And the second leg is the credit enhancement component. And by that, I mean some form or a product that covers some project risk, or at least PPA-related risk, which lenders are not comfortable to take. And that may vary depending on local banks versus international banks. And as we know, international banks remain a bit uncomfortable with three main risks, which are the termination risk, the change in law risk, change of tariff, curtailment, and international and dispute resolution mechanism. So this is the different structure we can work on in order to bring financing to the sectors, and already discussed some of them. First one being the local financing, second one being the ECA-backed financing, for which we have, as we said, precedents, as well as the AB loan structure. The two others, the DFI-backed financing with local bank guarantee, or the international bank financing with some limited sponsor support, structure that are yet less developed or has been less precedence or track record, though they have been worked on, and we're currently advising on one of them, and hopefully those will also become available soon. When it comes to assessing each of these financing solutions for a given project, the first criteria is obviously to compare them from a return on equity standpoint, and that's what our clients ask from us before us deciding which makes the most sense. This is an illustration of the work we have done on 100 megawatt plant onshore with a project return of 12%, which we have done using our proprietary financial model for the Vietnamese renewable energy market. I don't want to be too long, but here in the outcome of this analysis shows that the third option, which is the DFI source with a local bank guarantee, could look at the most interesting one, both from an equity valuation as well as non-recourse. Although if you look at only equity valuation perspective, you see that option 4 was from commercial banks who limit the sponsors report comes first, though those options or this financing structure, to our knowledge, needs some form of limited support at this stage. So not yet project finance. Another point I want to mention also when assessing each of these financial options beyond the expected return impact on the expected return to the sponsors, the following criteria. As I said, level of sponsor support, timing to closing associated to predictability. As we know, both wind and solar projects are subject to time constraint when it comes to securing the fit. So one of the key criteria for developer looking at de-risking the equity when selecting those options is really, how much time it'll take to close any of these options and how predictable it is that we'll reach financial closing on time. One comment here is you see from 3 out of 4 of these options 1, 2, and 3, each of them involve a local bank as lender and or guarantor, which bring an additional level of complexity, in particular when it comes to bridging the cultural gap between practices and policies between international and domestic banks. And this is something we have experienced on all the projects we have worked on when it involved local banks directly as lender or as guarantor. We need to keep in mind devils in the details, and sometimes reconciling this gap between practices of international lenders and local banks, or just practice understanding of where things works from the international developer's perspective and local banks can be challenging, a bit time consuming. These points is of which points I mentioned on the slide: debt service coverage calculation, debt service parameter, repayment schedule, equity level, cash distribution mechanism. All those may bring level of discussions between different financial institutions and developers, and this gap to be filled in. It's manageable, it's doable, but it needs to be factored in the credit process early on. It needs to be factored in the stage of negotiation of the term sheets. One of good example is cash distribution mechanism. I think the way international lender from experience approach and enable cash distribution is different from local banks who typically expect the cash. There's more cash to be distributed to the sponsor. They wanted to see that to be done pro rata between the lender and the equity provider. So a number of these aspects need to be factored in when selecting each of these options, but those are those gaps are manageable and can be resolved from experience. So this is well, I just wanted to share in terms of expanding retrospective on what we have learned in connection with execution of financing renewables in Vietnam. I think, as to conclude, yes, it's exciting market now to as the market grows with size of a single project reaching hundreds of megawatts to gigawatts of projects, a growing pipeline in the offshore wind sector. It brings certainly challenges for arranging project finance on a non-recourse basis to a new level of requirement. I think we all agree we will not be able to structure around the flows of the PPA as done for smaller scale project for onshore wind, the same way with respect to offshore wind. There is a need definitely for discussions which actually started between the banking sectors, the authorities, EVN, as to a needed modified risk allocation for offshore wind projects to bring much bigger debt financing to that sectors. It's a challenge, but as we have seen on the onshore wind space, those issues can be tackled, and we are optimistic that in the coming years, that's something that will be tackled as well in the offshore wind space. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for that, Hugo. That was a very interesting, very presentation full of facts and well, if not optimistic, at least gave a dynamic outlook on the financing possibilities, right? So I think that was very good, and I know there's an interest for presenters to share the presentations, and I think the arrangement is that this might be available from Brian in the next few days, right? Chi Tran is a senior energy specialist focusing on renewable energy efficiency and hydropower, and he is with the World Bank. He has more than 10 years with the World Bank in Vietnam, where he provides support to the government of Vietnam on policy and institutional development, strategic planning, and other support. He is currently the task team leader of several World Bank supported projects, such as the Vietnam Renewable Energy Development Project, as well as the Vietnam Renewable Energy Mapping and Spatial Planning, as well as other projects. Prior to joining World Bank, Mr. Tran worked for MOIT and as well as the power engineering consulting company #1 here in Vietnam. So Mr. Tran, please take the screen, or grab the screen and
Thanks, Stefan. Can you hear me now?
Yes, you can. We can hear you very clearly.
Okay, let me see how I can do that.
Are you going to share this? Are your presentation going to share, or?
Yeah, I can see it now. I think
sure.
I can see it now. Yeah. Hello, everyone. So first, I would like to thank you very much for inviting me to attend the event and share with you our study recently that we support the government of Vietnam to develop a roadmap for the offshore wind in Vietnam. And you may heard about the study before. The objective of the study is, to provide a strategic analysis to support the government of Vietnam to create some kind of long-term visions for offshore wind in Vietnam, to 2050. We could believe that would be good to serve as some kind of fundamental basic for the government of Vietnam in terms of development of any policy, regulation, planning, and other supporting infrastructure to develop offshore wind in Vietnam. And the study also, to provide some kind of the roadmap, to guide the government how they can deliver the vision in the future with a set, of action in terms of the policy framework and other as well. So that is the main purpose of the study.
Yeah.
Okay, I see it now. Okay, thank you. So as we have discussed, and we all agree that Vietnam have a very, very good offshore wind potential, and we believe that the potential can be developed, to add a least cost option for Vietnam to meet the growing power demand in the future. Remember that Vietnam very cautious about the cost, so the least cost option would be a very important factor for Vietnam to determine how they want to develop the offshore wind program. In order to meet the targets, we believe that and study also prove that Vietnam needs to be ambitious about the program, and they need to develop some kind of sizable volume of the offshore wind to maximize the benefits of the program. And the benefits should not, limited within the power generation, but need to be consider how Vietnam can benefit from job creation on the local economic developments, and more important, how Vietnam can participate in the international production chain to maximize the benefits. So I think that Vietnam needs to be ambitious and look the program as much broad the chance for them to get benefit rather than just focus on the develop 1 or 2 or 10 gigawatt of offshore wind in the future. And because of that, our study have simulated 2 scenarios in which the high growth scenario is believed that is sufficient that can be attractive for international investor to invest not only on offshore wind itself, but also to invest on other sector like supporting industry, create the job and all kind of that. So the big difference between the 2 scenarios that in low scenario we believe that it may not sufficient to attract the foreign investor, but in higher scenario it could be sufficient to attract the international investor. And with that approach, we do a lot of simulation about the level like cost, about what benefit Vietnam can get, and our studies show that in terms of benefits, the high growth scenario will bring much higher benefit of Vietnam. We estimate that Vietnam can earn about let's say up to $50 billion during 2015 to 2030 in the high growth. Why the benefit Vietnam can earn from low growth scenario could be about $13 billion. And I mentioned earlier, the gap in terms of benefit Vietnam can obtain program is not just from the side of the offshore wind generation, but also for the benefit that Vietnam can earn when they participate in the international production chain, and also to promote job creation, local economic development, and so on. So we believe that Vietnam, in order to obtain the maximum benefit of offshore wind, they need to aim about, let's say 10 gigawatt by 2030, 40 gigawatt in 2040, maybe 70 gigawatt in 2050. The study, of course, cover all aspects of the offshore wind development. For example, about the technical issue, about the policy framework, about procurement, about the safeguard, all kind of that. But the one I want to highlight here is that we also conduct very comprehensive about the job creation to see how Vietnam can benefit from that, because we think that other study about the technical geospatial planning have been done by other donor, but the job creation and other, economic development would be not the priority of other study. That's why our study have conducted this kind of analysis. And you can see in the graph that we believe that in the high growth scenario, Vietnam can create about 700,000 full-time equivalent job which could be created between 2020 and 2030, and for sure that it's very important for Vietnam, and that will make the offshore wind program much more attractive to the government of Vietnam, because they could, as the government, as a policy maker, they need to have a much broader consideration than that on the energy itself. And of course, in addition to that study, we also have some kind of the analysis to see that any other upgrades or enhancement of the infrastructure needed to deliver the program, particularly on the transmission line and the port. And it seems that in order to meet the demand for the high growth scenario, Vietnam may not need huge investment on transmission line, because some of them have been planned under PDP number 7, and some also have the PDP number 8. Of course, additional upgrade is needed, but we believe that it's not substantial. It's similar to the port, because that Vietnam have quite strong and rich experience of oil and gas industry, and they have a quite good infrastructure like port and equipment and so on. So the possibility for them to convert from oil and gas to offshore wind is, I don't say it easily, but it's possible with quite low cost. So I think it's a good chance for Vietnam to think through how they can convert the oil and gas industry to offshore wind to maximize the benefit that the country can get. And for the next step, we have finalized the draft version of the report, and the report had been shared with the governments I think 2 or 3 weeks ago. And our plan is that you can hear the feedback. We'll try to hear feedback from the government first. If we don't see any substantial feedback, you can share the report widely with all other stakeholders. So we very much hope that you will have a chance to review report and provide the feedback, and beyond that we can file a report, and we hope that the final report will be public in late September. So that is our plan. So that's all from my side, because I want to keep it short. So if you have any question, I can try to answer, or if you are interested to be part of a consultation process, please let me know, so I will make sure that we can send a report with you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Chi. Yeah, it was very nice, short and very sweet, I would say. So to everyone who's participating in this webinar, you can put in a question into the Q&A box, and we will try, or we may. We're running short of time here, but we might be able to pick up 1 or 2 questions as part of the panel discussion. And if nothing else, it might be something that the panelists could may be able to respond to directly as well. Or you feel free to also contact the panelists if you have anything specific. But Q&A box inbox is open, I believe. So the final panelist out of our four-man panel is let me see. We have Leonard Yu from Renewable Energy Global Solution. He's one of Singapore's pioneers and veterans in the technology developments in energy and offshore oil and gas industry sectors. and have more than 20 years of Asia Pacific experience in equity financing of very large infrastructure projects. He started Renewable Energy Global Solution, REGS for short, in 2002, and it's a firm working with project development and financial advisory. Among other things, the REGS team has secured Asian local infrastructure financing of over $1 billion of capital, including capital for landmark projects such as the portfolio water, environmental protection and waste to energy project for the Beijing 2008 Olympics, as well as the Vietnam's first industrial park, and also been involved in several of Vietnam's onshore and offshore oil and gas projects. Before founding REGS, Leonard worked at the Temasi-linked Keppel and Sembawang. There he held senior management positions in corporate planning, and he's also been the vice president of an Asian infrastructure fund that had among its shareholders ADB, GIC, and JBIC. Leonard, well, I'm sure we saved the best for the last, but I'm sure it's pretty close at least.
Thank you very much, Stephen, for the introduction. I hope you all can hear me.
Yes, we can see your screen and we can hear you.
All right, okay. I'll just try to keep it within the 10 minutes allocated so that we have more time for question and answer. As already mentioned by Stephen, we are based in Singapore and we are offshore wind farm catalyst developer. We are very active in projects in the south central part of Vietnam, which is typically offshore, and in the Mekong intertidal. So we are basically 3 decades of mega project developer. We are first mover when the team of REGS were previously in the Temasek Link companies in Singapore, and I myself was previously in a infrastructure fund belonging to GIC and Asia Development Bank. Okay, what we do is that we de-risk the project where nobody is interested. So we try to de-risk it so that it's bankable. And I have the personal satisfaction of being honored to share with all of you and all the interest party from all over the world about wind in Vietnam. And I think, I like to think that this is part of the results of our initiative to promote offshore wind in Vietnam. So these are part of the projects that we have done in the early 2000s, inclusive LNG gas, renewable energies for European companies in the 5 megawatt pioneering range. So let me start with the race to November 2021. So what is this race about? Basically, it is a race to bring Mekong Delta offshore or intertidal projects to commercial operation by 1st November. For those of you who are new in Vietnam, the whole impetus started because the Vietnamese government, after 7 years of drought and inactivity, increased the feed-in tariff to 9.8 cents for offshore wind, with a caveat that the wind farm should be operating by 1st of November 2021, which fortunately or unfortunately is only 15 months left. So what was the industrial response? There was some confusion among international developers because many people are more familiar with offshore wind farms in 40-meter water depth, just like what is happening in the southeast part of Vietnam, as opposed to a 150-kilometer stretch of Mekong nearshore or intertidal projects, which many developers are very quick, to ride on the 9.8 cents and say, hey guys, why go really offshore when you have it in near shore, you know, for the same price? So what happened is that by 2019 last year, there was a surge of monthly seminars on Vietnam wind. Bankers are coming in, putting pressure on the Vietnamese government, or rather EVN, to make their PPA bankable. And of course, there's also the spillover of Vietnam into Vietnam due to the successful Taiwanese grid allocation and international tendering. So what happened is that the Vietnamese government have managed to define offshore feed-in tariff qualification, and that has pulled a lot of developers to start taking 12 months wind measurement last year, and also starting a long queue, you know, of more than 50 projects in the Mekong Delta, totaling more than 8 gigawatt, you know. So this is very positive response. And what happens? We are now in August, and I really thank the organizers for making this seminar available, and to all of you friends over the world to join. So in Q1 this year, there were a lot of active marketing by wind turbine makers setting up offices in Vietnam. And in Q2, within a span of 6 months, 800 megawatts of orders have been made for wind turbines. Can you imagine 800 megawatts for 4 to 5 megawatt range would mean about 200 wind turbines are being ordered just within 6 months. And more encouraging is that there are foreign and local EPCI contractors jumping onto the bandwagon. So this is where the 16 months race began. That was last month. And actually, to be honest, I think most of you in the financial industry will agree with me that there are too much money chasing good wind projects in the world, you know. So I'm very pleased to share with you that the local developers are already now walking the talk by making deposits. So and what happened is that it's already August, and in 2 months' time, this is the last chance for developers and EPC contractors to do their sea survey, you know, when the monsoon ends in September. So what is at stake really? In my personal opinion, having been in Vietnam since 1985 as a young engineer, the confidence level of stakeholders is at stake. And the potential candidates, every one of you here who aspire your project to be in the draft PDP number 8 in 2 months' time, every one of you is a stakeholder. And more important, the future of Vietnam large utility, minimum 600 megawatt offshore wind farm is at stake. Why is it at stake? Because I was an engineer and I'm in private equity for the last 2 decades. I don't like to do things under pressure, and I don't like to manage risk when it is beyond my control. So last but not least, my message is that Mekong project success or failure could be inaccurately used as reference or demonstration projects for future offshore wind farm policy making and price setting. So what are the challenges? Misconception that intertidal implementation are less risk and easier than traditional offshore projects. Potential project candidates to submit large offshore wind projects, 1 gigawatt, costing 3 billion. I think these are challenges. And more important, the beautiful Mekong River that has been the gift of food, you know, food, water, and the most highly rich economical region in the world, as told to me by somebody from United Nations. These are the challenges that nobody talks about. Why? Because as most of you know, right, nearshore or intertie projects are very limited in the world. Yes, you have in Denmark. Yes, you have in PRC. But their foundation designs are different. Their environmental conditions are different. And last but not least, all of us have only one bullet left. We have only one low monsoon season here just to get 200 megawatts of projects constructed and meeting COD. And worse still, the only project that has been implemented 5 years ago by GE, and that is in BUiM, it delayed for 4 years, you know. It delayed for 4 years with turbines which are only 1 to 2 megawatts in size. And now we are talking about 5 megawatt turbines. So where can we find vessels which can lift heavier equipment in intertidal wave, where the minimum requirements for the vessel minimum draft is higher than previously required, which took 4 years to implement. Just look at what is going to happen by spring next year. There'll be 200 sets of nacelles. There'll be a boom in the laborious multi-pile foundations. Each of these foundation has 32 piles. They take 30 days to be completed. Let me give you 2 weeks, all right? In Europe, people are already installing 1 monopile turbine a day. So what is happening? What is happening is that there is an absence of a global certification standard for the wind farm. Yes, there is type certificate for the turbines. Yes, there are certificates for the foundation. But how about the offshore wind farm itself? I really have problems looking at research data and information about certification of intertidal wind farm. So is it going to be boom or bust for the next 20 years? We all clamor for a bankable PPA. But what does 20 years of PPA mean? It means we are going to have disruptions and coexistence of wind with economic activities. We are going to live with 20 years of offshore wind, or 20 years of monuments, you know, monuments showing up in the Mekong Delta. So what is the problem? The problem is that this race is unfortunately or fortunately being run by several 30, 90 megawatt wind farm developers, and everybody is having their own O&M philosophy, balance of plants philosophy, and there's a huge misconception between wind turbine availability versus balance of plant and versus offshore wind farm availability. So how about EIA and HSA in April next year, when the monsoons are down, when the birds are returning to the northern hemisphere, we are going to see 6 to 10 lifts per wind turbine. So we are going to see 2,000 lifts or 1,000 towers and components. And we are all going to do this between April and October next year. So what can be done? I would propose that stakeholders focus the next 15 months on ensuring the implementation success and making sure that the post-COD operation strategies and plan of the several 38, 90 megawatts wind farm trying to run a race. A race for what? A race for 9.8 cents? But what about COVID-19? What about supply chain? What about taking the next plane to commission your turbine? So my point is that we should try to reduce possible distraction of the second race to get high profile projects into the PDP 8. Yes, of course. Who is interested in 30-90 megawatt offshore wind farm? We are more interested in 1 gigawatt wind farm, 3 gigawatt wind farm. We are interested in bankable PPA. Who cares about the 20 years of PPA? Who cares what will happen to the Mekong Delta? Who cares what will happen to the fishermen? And are we sure the 9.8 cents is the correct pricing? Just because somebody put in 7 cents in Taiwan, just because the European are going below 10 cents, are we sure that 9.8 cents is the right price for a successful implementation of Southeast Asia's first utility megawatt wind farm? So let us please focus on addressing the next 15 months of implementation and challenges. Let me conclude with 4 slides. My team has been developing 3 decades of BOT and BOP project in Asia. We started the first offshore oil and gas facility 3 decades ago. When you look at the pictures of this jackup, and when you look at these pictures of this offshore lift, you still see them operating, and it is really very rewarding to realize that beyond financing, beyond construction, the equipment or the facility has been performing and serving the society and the energy industry after 30 years. If you look at Vietnam gas industry, which started in 1998, British Petroleum took 5 years to develop the integrated platforms from the Nam Kong Song field to the Phu My 3 power plant. It took them 5 years to develop. It took them 3 years to construct. And I'm proud to share with you that after 25 years of PPA, the Phu My 3 first Vietnam BOT power plant based on US dollar forex protected is still operating and contributing and supporting the economic growth of Ho Chi Minh City. So my point is this. My point is that what is really the KPI of the exciting wind farm developments and renewable, the sexy and all the hype? Are we proud that we are going to achieve COD by 1st November for financial investors and non-financial investors? Are we proud that there will be minimum warranty issues? Are we aware that Vietnam's intertidal offshore wind farm is going to be one of the largest in the world, beyond what we have done in Denmark, beyond what the Chinese have done in the Yangtze River? Are we proud that there's going to be high availability of wind turbine? Are we aware about the legacy of the Mekong Delta and the salination of the Mekong water and the drying up of the Mekong Delta due to the hydropower plant that have been built over the last 2 decades? So I think what is important is that there's an absence of long-term experience operator investors in all our excitement about wind in Vietnam. And there's also an obsession about low-cost construction. But I seldom find any researcher or speaker talking about operating strategy and challenges. Last but not least, are we sure that the 9.8 cents is the right price for this intertidal wind farm? Are we sure that the government thinks that that the 9.8 cents should be reduced? Are we sure that it shouldn't be increased? I don't have the answers. But let us be reminded that a 20-year PPA is not about a bankable PPA, but it's about 20 years of harnessing renewable energy to support the sustainable growth and the economic growth of the future generation of Vietnam. So let us think beyond November 2021. And my message is very simple. While it's good to talk about huge megawatt projects and bankable bankable PPA, I believe that the successful implementation and operation of Mekong Delta 500 megawatt portfolio of offshore wind farm is crucial for Vietnam's quest for wind renewables, and it will be a very important effect on the investors and financial confidence of Vietnam and Southeast Asia first wind development. So I hope all of you will join hands with me that let's try to do it right the first time. Thank you very much. That's all, Stefan.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for that, Leonard. I would say a lot of interesting questions, almost thought-provoking for that matter. So that was a very good roundup of a series of what I thought was excellent presentations here. They were all very, very good. And I'm saying that at a time when we're all getting a lot of webinar invitations. Okay, so we will have a bit of a panel discussion here on a couple of questions, and again, the Q&A box is open. If you want to or I see there right now there's a few requests for presentations as well as contact addresses, as maybe very specific questions on some of the presentations. I think well, again, Brian and the conference organizer will make that presentations available, and any questions on contacts and presentations, please make them to the conference organizer directly, as well as then if you have specific questions to any of the panelists, I think you can get the contact details and contact them, right? If you have any questions on the Vietnam wind or offshore wind that you want the panel to discuss, please try your luck and put them in the Q&A box. I'd like to actually, well, partly picking up on what you said, Leonard, one of your points at the end, I think, but several points that come back. I mean, there's no doubt that the outlook for wind and offshore wind, well, onshore and offshore wind, but wind power in general in Vietnam is very, very rosy and positive. It's in many ways it's a matter of timing, and the potential for near-term build out, as I said in the beginning, is almost what sets Vietnam apart from any other markets where wind power features strongly. Now, if set aside sort of build out to 2030, and I'm not going to take the extremely short-term view, but let's say for adding new wind power capacity and project coming to fruition in the next, well, if you want to have, you can have the 2021 deadline, but in the next 2-3 years, or what do you see as the main sort of obstacle from again realizing the full potential? Is it, I don't know, I mean, is it the financing wind power is a little bit trickier? Hugo put a very again positive or dynamic view on it. Is it logistics? And I was thinking of that before you put it up, Leonard. Is it the logistics? How do you actually go from not building many wind farms to now building a tremendous amount and much bigger with bigger turbines, and are there cranes enough, and is COVID disrupting the supply chain? So it's just the logistics part the biggest impediment, or is it financing, or is there any other issue here with respect to for example the network capacity and the curtailment risk? I don't know if you guys want to sort of comment on what you see as what could be a very strong market both in the short and long term, but what's the main problem in the short term if you, from your perspective. And it's for everyone, Leonard, Murthy, Hugo, Mr. Tran.
Pardon my bluntness, but I've been to Vietnam in 1985 when most of the technology was from the Eastern Bloc. And when they started the first offshore oil and gas in Vietnam in 1985, many things were according to the Russian standards. And it took Vietnam about 10 to 15 years before they conform to the American oil and gas standard. And the main reason is that it is the international insurance company that forced Vietnam oil and gas industry to conform to international standard. So my response to your question is that I sense that despite all the hype and all the support from everyone here, the problem is that seems to be a very huge misconception about how difficult or easy it is to build and operate a wind farm, whether it's onshore or whether it's near shore. I think those of you who have followed Vietnam knows the two landmark projects, the wind farm in Phu Quoc Island, built 10 years ago by Petro Vietnam, and the onshore wind farm, which was supported by the German sponsors. Nobody seems to be talking about the lessons learned. So while it is very good to see money flowing to Vietnam, the government giving support, I am really pretty worried that this hype will be over in 12 months' time if there are environmental issues in the Mekong Delta. You know, the Mekong Delta is a very sensitive delta in terms of a rice bed, in terms of fishery, in terms of export. So I would not even think ahead about what most of you think, because I can bet anyone here in 12 months' time, if there's an accident in the Mekong Delta, if there's an ecological disaster in the Mekong Delta, all of us can kiss offshore wind farm goodbye in Vietnam, and there'll be no more seminars. So the main thing I hope that to encourage all of you is that we need to go through a very tedious education of the policy makers. And you have to understand Vietnam. You know, Vietnam is a very unique country, 20 years of 6% GDP growth. But Vietnam cost of living is still very low, right? An engineer, a top-notch engineer from a good university is getting less than a few $1,000s a month. So the notion of a bankable PPA, the notion of paying for more than 9 cents is very challenging for the decision makers. But on the other hand, so the question is, how do we help Vietnam to come up with affordable PPA and affordable tariff for the next 20 years? I don't have the answers, but everybody here in this panel and everyone listening it have the answers. So I don't think it's a straightforward one PPA number, one size fit for all. And I'm sure with more seminars and more sharing, Stephen, I think we will find solutions, but not the way things has been going the last 6 months and the next 15 months. I really bet everyone here, you just need to take one accident, lifting 120 tons on a crane using onshore method, floating with a straight mooring with high Mekong Delta current. You just take one accident, and can you imagine 50 barges with small vessels transporting? So that's my point. I'm not thinking far ahead, you know.
No, I agree. I mean, there's several challenges. I think the one thing on timing, I just want to come back to that, is that the driver right now is the tremendous need for power, and it's a bit unusual. You know, you can argue it's a little bit unusual that sort of very fundamental supply-demand balance is the main driver for wind power. It's not always the case, and certainly with the urgency. Murti, you're working on a wind project. I mean, I don't know if you need to comment just from your perspective, but just in general, what do you see sort of as where can things trip up, as you know, if you look at the sort of 7 gigawatt of wind power onshore as well as nearshore approved for the next few years, with potential targets of 10 gigawatts in 5 years. I mean, as far as the logistics, the financing, just or I would put up the uncertainty on feed-in tariff beyond 2021. Just uncertainty, does that risk sort of creating a boom or a bust boom, or you know, with people not having to hold back because there's no clarity for an extended time?
Yeah, thanks, Stefan. Okay, from our discussions, obviously we are having a lot of discussions with MOIT and the province level authorities at various levels, and we do find that there is quite a bit of concern that capacity is required, and capacity is actually not going to come up, although capacity has been approved. A lot of capacity has been approved, 7,000 megawatt and more, but actual implementation on the ground is not happening that fast. And the reason for that is a lot of projects are still in the hands of the local developers, and they are finding it difficult to to sell them or move them around to the foreign developers because of so many other uncertainties. Like, for instance, as Leonard mentioned, November 21 is quite difficult for many projects now. Only 900 megawatt, I heard, is under construction. Even for those projects, I find that in some cases the transmission infrastructure is not ready yet. So most of the projects require extension beyond November 21. And the FIT for November 21 is after November, that is FIT2, it's not determined yet. So if all these 7,000 megawatt owners of projects wanting to sell the projects to international investors, of course we have to deal with not bankable PPA in the first place, but otherwise the FID2 is not there. So on what basis are you going to sell? And if the FID2 comes out only towards the end of last year, then again you're going to fall short of time to implement your project because you don't have enough time there by then. So these are some of the issues that they're facing. And about the engineering solutions to implement projects in Mekong Delta, I would just leave it to the engineers. I think the engineers are quite good in implementing projects in difficult terrains and difficult conditions. They'll find the right barges, they'll find the right cranes. I think when you're dealing with big companies like Vestas or Siemens and some of the EPC contractors who are working on these projects, they're quite good at implementing these projects with proper safety standards. So I wouldn't worry too much about accidents happening in the Mekong Delta. In finding engineering solutions for these projects, they will find the right solutions. But projects are probably not getting implemented because of permitting issues, because of bankability issues. So those are the things that I would worry more about rather than the engineering issues. And about why the provinces in the southern provinces are thinking about nearshore projects in the Mekong Delta. The reason for that is the nearshore areas, the soil conditions are very soft. The water is very shallow. The land is not suitable for a big amount of fishing as well. Is not suitable for a lot of economic activity. You can't have any holiday activity there. There are no beaches there. So the provinces felt that why not use that land for for renewable energy, for wind projects, because it doesn't disturb any economic activity and possibly brings up some economic activity in the area where there's not much happening. So that's what I find as the excitement among province leaderships to have the nearshore projects over there. Transmission line is an issue, deep foundation is an issue, but I think those are issues which can be sorted out with sufficient engineering and sufficient planning.
Okay, Hugo, you're focusing a lot on the financing side in a very interesting way, I might say, in your presentation. As far as again implement or real all these gigawatts of wind power in a relatively short or short medium term, do you think financing will be an issue? I mean, it's a bit more. It's in general more harder to finance it. Wind power than solar power, will, I mean, even if you have these options and they can be realized, will there be enough capacity? Will local bank financing be a bottleneck in sort of realizing the full or coming up with full financial support for 7 gigawatts of wind power, or 10 gigawatts if you want to say so? Having to yeah, if anyone else wants to comment on it. Otherwise, Mr. Tran, I mean, what do you see it from World Bank's perspective? Will on the financing side, and do you think? Yeah, World Bank is giving a lot of technical advice and capacity building. How is World Bank looking at sort of supporting the overall financing and funding of all these gigawatts? Again, it's one way to find solutions or ways to finance 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 projects, but we're talking about 7 or 10 gigawatts of projects at this point.
You know, from my point of view, we think that, you know, financing for, you know, 7 or 10 gigawatt of offshore wind in Vietnam would not, you know, I don't say it's easy, but I don't think that it would be impossible if the governments have a very, you know, long-term and firm visions on what government want to obtain, right? Because I think that the issue in Vietnam is that how to win up confidence of the investor that, you know, the government is serious and have a long-term vision to make sure that that is long-term business for them. So I think that that's more important than how Vietnam can mobilize financing for the project, because I believe that you know, offshore wind very attractive investment if the government will play a very sound and predictable policy framework. So because of that, so our support to the government is not really about how to finance for the project. Of course, they can finance for some kind of transmission network upgrades, some kind of the common infrastructure if needed, but it's not really our priority. And remember that the government of Vietnam right now have facing some difficulty in terms of, you know, public debt ceiling. That's why they're not willing to borrow money, you know, ODM money to finance for that. So our priority is how to have the government to develop and retain a sound and good, you know, policy framework. And I think that by doing so, we can have a more impact rather than try to, you know, put some, you know, a couple of million or, you know, $5 million. So that is the way we see it. And I think that it might be in a couple of, you know, short term, 1 or 2 or 5 years, I think that is the way we want to do. But of course, we open for all other opportunity in case that they want to finance for some part of the transmission network, for example. Of course, we're willing to do so. So yeah, that's my view. Thanks.
Okay, excellent. We got off, well, the overall webinar got off to a little bit of a late start, and we're running, I think we're running an hour late or so. So Brian, I'm ready to sort of call it a day for this panel. And again, I just want to repeat, I thought myself that all 4 panelists had excellent presentations. So certainly was worth for those who was staying around and watching it. I see that, and I know that I see in the Q&A box, and I know there will be a lot of interest in sort of presentations. So maybe you could advise the plans for how you will share the presentations that would be available, Brian, and then sort of just wrap it up.
Yes, thank you for all of the speakers, panelists, and the moderator. Regarding the recording and the presentation, we are sharing within 3 working days and send a download link by email.
Yeah, and if I'm not sure if it was in any distribution material, but if anyone wants to have the email addresses to the presenters, they can contact you, and I'm sure you can provide it.
You register online by Zoom, and Zoom have a participant list. We will send out the recording and the presentation by a link to download.
Okay. And I'm thinking the contact list. I see in the Q&A box there are some questions directly to individual presenters. So I think that's best if they don't have the email addresses, it's something you can provide, right?
Yes. No worries. We say at the beginning we have like 248 participants, and currently we still have like 120 participants for nearly more than 2 hours. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for your participation, and we will see you soon, like October 20 to 21 in Ho Chi Minh. I think the same place, Vimper Luxury Landmark 81 Hotel in Ho Chi Minh City. We will organize here.
Thank you very much, Brian.
Yeah. Thank you for your time. Any questions, please send me email.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Brian.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Stephen.
Have a nice
Okay,
day.
bye.
Thank
Bye.
you. See you.
Bye. See you guys.